And sending you live right now, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're back for the public hearings. Our thoughts continue to be with those who were affected by Hurricane Teddy, which is working its way through. We understand there's a lot of coastal storm surge, and our thoughts are with those folks who have been asked to, I think, to evacuate if possible from coastal areas. All right, colleagues, let's begin. This is public hearing, case number 22367. Amendments to the Cole Harbour Westfall Municipal Planning Strategy Land Use Bylaw for 272 Auburn Drive. So thank you to everybody who's joining us for this meeting. The order of events will be similar to a regular public hearing. We will start with the staff presentation, then give the applicant an opportunity to present. After that, we will go to public hearing speakers list. For those who have signed up by 4 o'clock yesterday, 4:30 yesterday, one speaker has registered. So going to ask staff if they're ready to present. Who do we have?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Dean McDougall here, just making sure, is my video working?
We got you.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. So yes, my name is Dean McDougall. I'm a planner with HRM, and I'll be the staff presenting the public hearing tonight for case 22. Pardon me?
So, what was that?
I think it was Councillor Hensby.
Mr. Mayor, there seems to be an audio echo and delay in the two sequences.
Dean,
sure, I'll keep talking and see if it corrects itself. So this is the public hearing for case 22367. Next slide, please. So the applicant for this application is Lloyd Robbins Law Inc. on behalf of the property owner, and the location is 272 Auburn Drive in Westphal. And the proposal is to remove commercial uses and rezone the property to an R4 zone to allow for an apartment dwelling of up to 6 units. Next slide, please. In terms of site context, the site is shown in the red circle on both images. The left-hand image gives you an idea of where the property is situated in relation to the Forest Hills Main Street Commercial Hub, which is located at the top left-hand corner of the left-hand image. The body of water running north and south on the left-hand image is Cranberry Lake, and Cole Harbour Place would be located just at the cutoff at the bottom of the image, bottom of the image, left-hand image. And on the right-hand image, you can see the parking lot of Auburn Drive High School. So the subject property is located right beside the high school. Next slide, please. Zooming in just a little bit here, you can see the property is located on a corner lot with the low-density residential uses surrounding it. Next slide, please. So here's the property standing on the corner of Auburn Drive and Quindora Crescent. This photo was taken last fall, and as you can see, its built form takes that of a residential building. The current use is residential on top with commercial on the bottom. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of background into the planning history for the site and area. This area was developed as part of the Forest Hills Master Plan Community by the Nova Scotia Department of Housing. So this planned unit development, or PUD, by the province intended to provide a range of housing options and included provisions for a community park, a trail system, institutional uses, and commercial uses. Now, the intent of the province was to rezone the area under the land use bylaw as phases were complete. So the zoning in certain areas today reflects the existing land use that was there at the time of being brought under the Cole Harbour Westphal MPS LUB. Next slide, please. So the area is governed by the Cole Harbour Westphal land use bylaw, and the subject property is zone C1, the neighborhood business zone. And this zone was created to allow for the continuation of existing neighborhood commercial uses, which were created under the PUD development mechanism. So the permitted commercial uses in the zone were limited to what existed at the time of being brought under the land use bylaw. There is policy within the MPS that allows for consideration of additional uses within the C1 zone by development agreement. So that's policy UR 18. Next slide, please. In terms of the planning policy, the area is designated urban residential, which recognizes the plan area as established community and identifies it as a priority area for continuing residential development. The intent of the designation is to recognize the existing built residential environment, which is primarily single unit dwellings, while providing for a variety of housing types and densities as the community continues to grow and evolve. And the MPS establishes a target of a ratio of 70 to 30. So 70% single unit dwellings, 30% other types of densities. And through the MPS policy UR9, the R4 or multi-unit zone may be considered for the lands by rezoning. Next slide, please. So MPS amendment considerations, as a refresher, amendments to the MPS should only be considered when circumstances have changed since the document was originally adopted. Circumstances would need to change to the extent that the original land use policy is no longer appropriate. And on September 24th, 2019, Regional Council initiated the MPS amendment process for this request. Next slide, please. So the proposal, the property owner has determined that it's no longer viable to operate a convenience store at this location and has sought to change the permitted use on the property under the enabling policy. So initially the application came in for a request for a development agreement to expand the permitted commercial uses on the site. This application went to a public information meeting in 2019, and the overwhelming response from the public was that commercial uses were not supported and they were not considered compatible with the residential area. So after this meeting, the applicant reassessed his proposal and agreed with the public. The commercial viability of the convenience store was limited, and converting the entire subject site to an all residential use was more economically viable and also reflected the community's desire. So the applicant amended his request to rezone the property to the R4 zone to enable a small-scale multi-unit residential building on the property, utilizing the existing building. So the intent is to complete renovations rather than a complete tear down and rebuild. But to enable the request, the applicant has to amend the MPS to remove the commercial handcuff, so to speak, that was placed on the property. Next slide, please. So in terms of public engagement, 2 public engagement sessions were held. The first was a town hall meeting held on January 23rd, 2019, where approximately 33 people attended. And this engagement was on the first iteration of the application, so the commercial uses. So after the overwhelming response that commercial wasn't supported by the community.
Mr. Mayor, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I believe Councillor Hensby is not connected to the meeting at the moment. Can we please hold just for one moment to try to reconnect him? As we've noted, if the councillor is not present for the entirety of the staff presentation, he will not be able to vote on the matter.
Okay, I got a text from David saying that he fixed it. David, you not with us? He's listening to the presentation, Phoebe. That's okay, isn't it?
Yep, as long as he can hear the presentation, I don't think there's any issue with that.
Okay, go ahead, Dean.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as I was saying, after the overwhelming response that commercial wasn't supported by the community, the applicant revised their application accordingly. And so the second level engagement was on that second iteration. And that was consultation achieved through a mail-out notification, fact sheet, and conversations with the planner and the public. So feedback from the community generally include the following. So impact on property value. Some community members thought the multi-unit would negatively impact the property value. There was concerns around parking, on-street parking and parking in the general area, and then upkeep of the building and property. So maintenance, garbage collection, things like that. And in terms of notifications mailed, it was 196. Web page views were 151, and letters and emails received were 5. Next slide, please. So if you remember, the existing land use created through the PUD mechanism was locked in place through the MPS and land use bylaw. So this amendment to the municipal planning strategy is necessary as it removes the restriction that the site be a neighborhood convenience store only, and it allows for the rezoning request to enable the desired residential uses in the property. So the MPS amendment is simply just the cross out of the sentence there that calls out 272 Auburn Drive specifically. Next slide, please. So with the commercial restriction lifted by the MPS amendment, the rezoning from the C1 to the R4 zone can be analyzed. Analysis of the site has determined that the existing building will not meet the minimum yard requirements in the R4 zone, and satisfying the parking requirements of the LUB will be challenging and could result in an entirely asphalted yard. So therefore, to avoid creating a non-conforming structure and reduce the amount of required asphalt parking, the applicant has requested a further site-specific amendment to the LUB, relaxing certain requirements to allow for the adaptive reuse of the existing building. So this slide here shows the chart, regulations of 272 Auburn, the proposed regulations, compared to the regulations of the R4 zone. And just quickly going through it, you can see front setback, flank setback, rear and side yard setback, lot coverage, parking and amenity space have all been altered to try and allow for that adaptive reuse of the existing building. Next slide, please. So rationale for the proposed policy. The amendment will remove the ongoing possibility for the site to be home to business options, which were unsupported by the community. The rezoning will remove a use which has become incompatible with the neighborhood and no longer provides the perceived conveniences which had been offered in previous decades. It will enable the transition of the area to a fully residential community. And lastly, the property is suitable to host a small-scale multi-unit building, as it has direct access to established outdoor amenities, access to the downtown core via transit. It's complementary to many other types of residential dwellings within the neighborhood in terms of its built form. It's located on the fringe of a low-density neighborhood, not in the middle of the street. And lastly, vacancy rates are low in this area, and providing alternative housing options other than a single-unit dwelling or basement apartments might help at those rates. Next slide, please. So with that, staff recommend that Regional Council adopt the proposed amendments to the MPS and LUB for Cole Harbour Westval as set out in attachments A and B of the staff report dated July 6, 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Question of clarification, Councillor
Yes.
Nicol?
Thank you. I was just on the land use bylaw and all what you just had up on the screen with regards to the requirements. But when it comes, it says also that no amenity area shall be required, and you spoke about the asphalt and, you know, trying to negotiate that. So could you elaborate and expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So the current requirements in the R4 zone require a parking space, 1.5 parking spaces per unit. And with the site having an existing building on there and the amount of land available, requiring that amount of parking per unit could result in the entire yard being taken up for parking. So a reduction to just one parking space per unit was provided in hopes of deterring that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Then we will open the public hearing, and we invite the applicant to address council, and we'll move the slides for the applicant, but I believe the applicants are Lloyd Robbins and Yuri Ayub. Is that correct?
Yes, this is Lloyd Robbins here. Mr. Ayub is at his home. He is listening on his phone, but I will be doing the speaking tonight. Okay,
welcome, sir. The floor is yours.
Okay. Mr. McDougall has done a good job of presenting what we want to do. Just to reiterate, my client's father built this building in the mid-90s, and my client lives across the road from it and operated the variety store. And as Mr. McDougall said, as the marketplace has changed in the 2000s, the viability of the variety store became dramatically in question, to the point where right now it's a boarded up building and definitely a detraction to the community. When we made our first application, we had thought that we were going to try to find commercial uses that would fit and be compatible with the neighborhood, perhaps the lawyer's office, something like that. But when we went to the public information meeting, it became dramatically clear that the community did not want a risk of the continuation of any variety store type use on that property. Their concerns were related to the history of this building has had a problem with garbage collection, people dropping wrappers as they leave the premises, and also it being so close to the high school, it became kind of a place where people would hang out. So these were both negative things that my client tried to control, but very difficult to control. So after we heard the information meeting, it became very clear that we needed a new plan. And what we want to do is make a small capacity residential building. And I've provided a PowerPoint picture. I can't see what's on your screen, so could that PowerPoint picture be put up?
It's on the screen now.
Okay, this is the building. This is a conceptual view of the building that we would like to have on the building. It basically looks like a row of townhouses. And with respect to the comment about the amenity space, we worked really hard to get rid of that driveway in the front. Those black squiggles on there are supposed to show you grass. We want to put 2 parking spaces, which will be much like all the parking spaces in the neighborhood. And on the Quindora side, if you look at slide number 2, do you have slide number 2?
Yes.
Yes. You'll see that we've put the parking underneath the building. So we have 7 spaces. We're only required to have 6, but what we've gained with this parking plan is we're planning to grass this whole area and make this an attractive property. We live across from it, so we want an attractive property to look at. So that's the design of what we want to do. And as to the 5 letters, the impact on property value, I believe what we are doing is going to raise the property value. This abandoned store, I'm sure, detracts from it right now. The number of units we're going to keep small, 4 to 6. The upkeep of the building, we live across the road from it, and I believe the building itself, except for it's boarded up now, is reasonably kept. And I believe when we create the apartment, we're going to be renewing a lot of that. And my client has advised me that he's going to rebuild fences, et cetera, because he wants to be a proud property owner. Additional traffic in the area was the other one. I'm not really understanding that. It's basically 6 cars. I don't think that would have an effect. I do think that I listened to the comments about a low vacancy rate in that area and providing alternative housing options. I believe this apartment, these apartment units will do that. And I believe that we fit all the plans and the policy of the plans. And I would ask the council to approve our application. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robbins. We appreciate that. I see just a question of clarification from Councillor Nicol. If you want to go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. Robbins. You know, it's very hard from what was presented to actually visualize, you know, how you're going to retrofit this building. But I wanted to ask, is it not customary? I don't know whether that would be you that would answer, but I don't think that you are permitted by engineering standards to have more than 1 driveway on any given street for a residential area. So I just wondered if you had looked into that.
Well, I have looked into that, and I have talked with engineering staff about it, and My view of the bylaw is that there is discretion in it to allow a second driveway, and I firmly believe in the circumstance of this, it is a discretion that could be exercised because it's what's going to add the amenity to the community. If it has to be one driveway, then we get back to having this paved area. But I've had discussions with engineering, and I believe, I don't want to put words in engineering's mouth, but I believe that she understood what I wanted to do, and
Engineering meaning HRM engineering?
HRM engineering, yes.
Okay.
And I don't know that she out and out supported it, but she certainly did not say nay, and I believe she wants to make her final decision when it comes time, when we actually put a building permit application in.
Correct. And this is not for my colleagues, this is not a development application. This is a rezoning. So it's totally a different format that we're discussing here tonight. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. Yes, I agree. But I believe there is room in the engineering bylaw to allow the two driveways, and definitely the driveway over on Quindora. So, and I think that it will make it a better
we will wait for the
development.
planner. The planner can respond to that after. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Robbins. If there's no other questions or clarification, any member of the public who's registered with the clerk's office will be given 5 minutes to address the topic. When you're called upon to speak, each speaker is asked to begin by stating your name and the community in which you reside for the record. And the speaker that's registered for this is a familiar name, I think, to council. Mr. Ron Cooper, are you with us?
Attached to Ron Cooper here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, sir. Welcome to council. You've been here before, have you not?
A few times I've been there.
Welcome.
And I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be there again.
Welcome.
Mayor Savage and members of council, my name is Ron Cooper, a fairly long-time resident of the Cold Harbor community, and with a continuing interest in the planning and development of the community. This is a response to the 272 Auburn Drive rezoning request. I'd like to start off with some general comments. The procedure and process followed by the department planning and development with regard to this case is quite a stack of papers. This location and the general community commercial has been in focus probably since 1990. This case, although centered on one location, may in fact impact a number of other locations in the community and could result in a major departure from what was the original vision for the community development. Sorry, with regard to multiple unit developments. More on this in a little while. I must note that during the process, there has been no discussion on possible alternatives presented so far, which may be more appropriate in the circumstances. Also, I wonder if in light of the COVID-19 situations that we find ourselves in, whether there was actually adequate publicity and notice with regard to the special meeting of the Harbor East Marine Drive Council held on June 30th. Now, on to with regards to the case, I'd like to offer the following. I believe that there's fair coverage of most of the historical and present-day legislation, planning documentation that applies to this aspect of the Cold Harbor community. But I also believe there is a rather large gap around and just prior to the time of the amalgamation. There was a planning initiative carried out to develop a planning document in order to have a coherent and realistic views toward the ongoing development and to reflect the view of the community. This initiative was under the guidance of the municipality of the County of Halifax and was passed by the council and approved by the province. It was a municipal development plan. That document and views, I suggest, stand as the foundation for the Coal Harbour development. Some of the basic building blocks were as follows. R1 and R2 were to be the preferred form of dwellings in the community. Commercial development was to be located, depending on primary targeted clients, on the highway commercial designation or the community commercial designation. Multiple unit development was to be located in the highway corridor or the whole Coal Harbour Road corridor. Keeping the aforementioned points in mind, I would suggest a 6-unit apartment building located at 272 Auburn Drive is in fact a major change from what was the foundation planning for the community. And as I mentioned, could have other implications for other locations. And I think the whole item reserves a broader consideration. And why I mention other locations, because under the planned unit development, there were in fact 4 or 5 locations who suffer from the same outcome as 272 Auburn Drive. And I would have to ask the question, if one area can be granted the R4 status, then the other locations, which suffered the same fate as Auburn Drive, would have a major cause to come into the municipality and say they would like to have the same opportunity as 272.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
30 seconds, I didn't know it was that slow. Anyway, with regard to community involvement, if you actually look at the pages that's in the report, you will see most of the residents say the R1 and R2 would be their preference. To relax the requirements for the R1 site would end up in trying to horseshoe or shoehorn this development onto that lot. And in fact, with the amount of parking, I would wonder if it meets the requirements on the Quindora side to the adjacent residential unit.
Your time is complete.
We'll let you finish up. Finish up,
right,
Mr. Cooper.
Good, I appreciate that. There is a compatible range of living units in the community now, R1, R2, and 5, with basement parts, etc., and possible auxiliary units to come. I believe decisions in this case are not appealable, and I also believe rejection or further consideration are the only 2 viable operations. With that, I would close and thank council for their time. Just reiterating, this is a major change from what was the original planning development for the community. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Appreciate your time tonight. There are no other speakers.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say publicly, there is a resident that just emailed me. He's having difficulty connecting virtually. I let Phoebe know, so maybe she could assist him. It was about this public hearing specifically.
Okay. Councillor Russell, did you have a question of clarification or something there?
Just a little bit of uncertainty. This is they're looking to put a 4-unit building here, or convert this to a 4-unit building. I'm wondering how close is the next 6-unit, I'm wondering how close is the next multi-unit dwelling? We see some townhouses there when we look at the satellite view, but I'm wondering if there's anything like a multi-unit dwelling anywhere near.
So I'll tell you what, let's close the public hearing and go to debate on that, and then that question can be answered.
Hello? Hello?
Move to close the public hearing.
No.
Councillor Nichols.
Hello?
Yeah, who is this?
This is Lloyd Robbins. Before the hearing's closed, I would like to respond to the one comment.
Okay, I think, hang on a second. That's normally the case, John, Traves. It's not, I think that's what we can do, though.
Yes.
Normally, we give the applicant a chance to respond, so go ahead, Mr. Robbins.
Yes, we do.
Okay, it's a very simple response. I read UR9 says that in UR2 you can establish a range of types of housing in a community. I'm interested in the comment as to how close the next multi-unit is. I'm not believing it's very close. The speaker also talked about the driveways on Quindora Drive. We are moving the driveway away from the adjacent residential use and putting it going under our building. And we're doing the same thing on Auburn Drive. Right now, cars, when they come to the store, park facing with their lights facing the next door neighbor. And that's why we're putting in a driveway to change the alignment of that whole neighborhood. We're working very hard to make this building a compatible building. And lastly, if there's an overriding concern about other sites, I believe that they should be dealt with in the same manner, because all of us, the variety stores, if they're failing, we need to find a way to make them viable uses. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Councillor Nicol has moved the public hearing closed, seconded by?
I'll second that.
Councillor Russell. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? I'll go to Councillor Nicol first and then Councillor Russell.
Thank you. I guess I'll put the motion on the floor. Does Halifax Regional Council adopt the proposed amendments to the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw for Cole Westfall as set out in attachments A and B of the staff report dated March 26, 2020, to remove commercial uses and enable residential uses at 272 Auburn Drive?
Second, Councillor Mason.
Seconded by Councillor Mason. Councillor Nicol.
I will speak to it because at the end of the day, I've heard from a lot of people, and there's still people that are trying to listen to this. It was very, I would say, quick after I became the councillor in 2008 to become familiar with this building and the concerns with regards to the maintenance and the activity around it. That being said, that is something that the municipality would have responded to and will continue to respond to. There's been everything from concerns about the stairwell and the decking and things like that. So there has been, it's been a busy file, but I know, having gone to the public information meeting when the intent was to expand upon commercial use, it was not well received by the residents. And it was to explore possible medical uses is what it was, as it was presented. So very happy that the applicant decided to come to return to residential, like former councillor Ron Cooper said was the intent initially. But when it comes to actually determining, I guess I'll speak to Dean to ask him to respond to the question with regards to the engineering standards of the driveways, as the applicant just again tried to attempt to clarify that point. I wanted to ask Dean to come back and ask that. But when it comes, I've heard a lot about, viable uses and the right sizing and small scale capacity. For 6 units for the small scale capacity, you are asking to enlarge the footprint of this building. And you're going in towards, like, basically when I look at the aerial shot from Dean's presentation, you see at the end of the asphalt, you're going to come to that, and then the driveway is just basically going to be underneath for some of the units, is what I understand from, I apologize, the drawings are very, very hard to sort of figure out what is going to be there, and that's where the concerns are from the resident. They really don't necessarily are seeing what the end result is going to be. So I'm just asking for that clarification from Dean first as to, because this is a rezoning. Like I said, it's not a development application. It's unfortunate that the residents feel that they have the ability to sort of impart what they want to see on this site, but at the end of the day, it's just rezoning from commercial to residential.
Dean, did you get? Sorry, Dean, did you get that question?
Yes, hello, Councillor, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Councillor. I'll just speak to the engineering question first. As you've mentioned, this is a rezoning application, so those type of details and specifics aren't really examined like they would be in a development agreement application. So they would be worked out between the engineer and the applicant at the time of permitting. I can state that HRM's bylaw S300 respecting streets, it for lots between 30 and 100 meters of frontage, they can only have they can't have more than 2 driveways. So the frontage on both Auburn and Quindora is less than 30, so it would be only permitted by the standards to have 1 driveway on each side. Now, whether there's room for negotiation, I can't speak to that as I'm not the engineer, but those negotiations would happen at permitting.
Okay. And I do, from, you know, like I said, looked at this from all sides, and like I said, I'm very appreciative of it going back to residential, but right from when I first saw this of up to 6 units, I would be much more comfortable with it being at a maximum of 4 units because of the enlarged footprint that it would require to have the 6 units. So I would like to amend the motion to go with alternative 1, and it's basically just to add where it says to attach the attachments A and B of the staff report from up to 6 units to a maximum of 4 units. And I ask for council to allow me that amendment. Do you understand? I see Councilor Mayor looking.
If a seconder is needed, I would second that.
Thank you. I do need a seconder. The alternative is in the staff report.
So,
And I know that the motion's on the floor right now, so I feel it needs to be amended at this time.
Mr. Mayor, can the applicant speak?
not at this time.
No, we can't. Mr. Traves, though, is that a substantive amendment?
Yes.
So, Mr. Mayor, the process, if council wishes to take a councilor's suggestion, would be to defer this matter pending a supplemental report, which would provide a draft of the necessary changes to the MPS and the bylaw, and to schedule a new public hearing. It would be a substantive amendment, given that what you're contemplating is actually a reduction of about 1/3 of the capacity of that residential building from what they would otherwise be entitled at 6 to 4 units.
Councillor Nichol?
Yes, that's what the residents seem to want to have the input on. So at the end of the day, this is what I'm putting on the floor.
So, John, so if that's an amendment that goes on the floor, we would speak to it and vote on it?
I would suggest it's not an amendment, Mr. Mayor, so much as it's a motion. It should be a motion to defer with a direction for staff to redraft the attachments in order to provide for a cap of 4 units rather than what they would be otherwise permitted. And then it would return to council on that basis after we'd have to reschedule to have a new public hearing.
Okay. Because in speaking with planning, I was offered the suggestion that I could go with alternative 1, which was there in the report.
But in order to achieve that, planning would have to redraft the attachments, which is the changes, and also we would have, because it's substantive, we would have to reschedule schedule a new public hearing. So the way that we have traditionally done this is to defer the decision you're being asked to make tonight, if that's council's will, and direct staff to prepare a supplemental report and schedule a new public hearing.
Okay.
And John, we can't ask the applicant their view on this.
No, you've closed the public hearing, Mayor. I think, I don't think anybody would be surprised by the applicant's view. They're very much indicated, and I think the planners, if you were to ask them, would advise you that they wish to proceed by way of this rather than a development agreement. And from the plans, clearly have laid out that a building which would potentially be 6 units. So this restriction would be significant change.
Okay, so that's the deferral motion that Councillor Nichols put on the floor, seconded by Councillor Russell.
Okay.
So on the deferral, we have a number of people. Councillor Hensby.
If I may, Mayor, just add one more thing that just so council is aware on the deferral, this is essentially an application by the property owner for what many would see as a downzoning. It's voluntary. In the interim, if they so choose, they could withdraw their application and they would have their right to proceed with the commercial property as it is. So that is the sort of a nuance in terms of what you're looking at in these circumstances.
Okay, but that doesn't.
So to clarify to John, basically, what all the residents have asked of council or of their councillor, there is nothing at this point that I could do to address their concerns.
If council wishes, they could put this limit on, but it comes at the risk that the applicant withdraws their application and proceeds as a commercial property. This is essentially an offer to downzone to a residential, which would permit them 6 units from commercial. And that is the challenge. If the preference of council is to see this as a residential unit on these terms, then I would suggest you proceed. If you wish, it's certainly up to council to put a limit on this. But as I said, it comes at some challenge as to whether the applicant would proceed.
Okay, so we're on the question of a deferral. Councillor Hensby.
Well, Mr. Mayor, on a question of deferral, if it goes back for deferral for a staff report, is there another public hearing, or will there be an opportunity for the applicant to make his comments known about the downsizing and from, taking 1/3 of his capacity away? And here we are trying to talk about affordable housing opportunities, and you're going from 6 to 4. It's going to put an additional capital cost on him to try to recoup his return on investment. Also, in regards to the commercial status of it, if it was all apartments, would that be considered a commercial venture if it was all apartments? Was there an apartment buildings considered a commercial properties?
I think apartment buildings are considered residential, John, correct?
R4 is residential.
I think at a certain size it becomes questionable. It's probably a question for the planning department at this point. I'd have to do some legal research, but at a certain point, I think you could argue it's commercial. But at small size like this, I think you would be normally seen as residential, frankly, at 6-unit building.
Councillor Hensby.
I'd like to see him keep his capacity, though the applicant is a constituent of mine from Morristown. I'd like to see him keep his capacity and opportunity to provide more housing opportunities for the area.
Thank you. I got Councillor Cleary next.
Thank you. And Mr. Traves, feel free to ask our planners, but residential, regardless of size, could be 300 units. It's still residential. You're confusing tax and business uses versus land use. Land use is land use. So it's residential regardless. R4 is residential. Anyway, my question, it's not so much a question. I guess it's a question, but it's rhetorical. And with all due respect, Councillor Nicol, I mean, if this was something you wanted to work on, why didn't you work on it before tonight? Meet with the property owner, meet with residents, meet with planners. You would know after your 12 years on council that public hearings, when you make substantive changes, have to go back to another public hearing. I don't see anything incompatible with 6 units with the neighborhood. I just went Google view around the whole street, looking at this building, looking at the drawing. Looks fine. Anyway, I'm not going to vote for the deferral because I think 6 is fine. I think the proposal is fine. I don't see it as incompatible with the neighborhood. But anyway, politics is politics. There you go.
Thank you. Councillor Whitman, you with us?
I'm here, Mayor Savage, and thank you very much. I've never agreed with Councillor Cleary so much in my life. I will not be supporting the deferral. I don't like moving the goalposts with 1 minute left in the fourth quarter. And this person has come to see us today, and I guess someone had a hard time getting in on the call because of technology, and got to Councillor Nicol, and all of a sudden this has to be changed. And this looks like the right thing for the neighborhood, and I appreciate this. I appreciate what Councillor Hensby had to say about adding, housing units, and this is exactly what the area needs. So I will not be supporting the deferral. I encourage my colleagues to proceed with this as planned and not move the goalposts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Karsten.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So if Councillor Whitman, let me get this straight, has never agreed with Councillor Cleary as much as this particular instance, and I agree with Councillor Cleary, then I guess I have to say I've never agreed with Councillor Whitman more than this particular issue in 8 years. It's just as simple as that. With, again, all respect to all of our colleagues at all times, Councillor Cleary said it. It's not like this is just a decision that has to be made on the flip of the dime. This has been a long, drawn-out process. There's been a PIM. There's been first reading. That's, and I recall so vividly in one of our recent first readings, our solicitor said, this is the time to make changes at first reading. So that when we go to public hearing, it's within the parameters of what's advertised. So no, I won't either support the deferral, and in fact, I know that area quite well as well, and I agree with Councillor Cleary, who's pretty good at looking at maps. I think it is compatible with the neighborhood for what we want neighborhoods to look like. I mean, we can't forget the regional plan. If there's space, we can't forget what we've done recently in terms of the secondary suites and backyard suites. This is a perfect location, actually, to show just a little increase in density. Look at what the proponent actually stated to us. They wanted to proceed with still putting in a law firm or something, and they listened to the community, and in fact now are moving to this residential. I think it's a great fit. I'd like to have seen more on the actual architectural model as opposed to a little pencil drawing, but certainly conceptually from what I see, it's good and I'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stretch.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and I think you all are being a little too hard on Councillor Nicol. This, these are strange times. Things are happening pretty fast. A lot of people are missing cues as it relates to getting their views into their members. So I can appreciate where the councillor is at right now. She's between a rock and a hard place. But here we are. And before I say anything further, my God, it was good to hear Ron Cooper's voice again. I remember when I first came to council in '99, he was an elder statesman and still is. So real good to hear Ron speak here again at council. And, quite frankly, notwithstanding anything he did say and in my preamble, unfortunately, Councillor, I'm not going to be able to support the deferral either. And I just want to touch on what the solicitor said. I couldn't tell who the solicitor was for a moment, whether it was Councillor Cleary or Mr. Traves, but clearly, be careful what you ask for, because he said if we handle this wrong, then the developer may be right back in a spot where a commercial venture that is even less appetizing to the community could be in front of them. So I will not be supporting the deferral and would likely support the original motion. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Anybody else on the motion to defer? Okay, let's vote on the motion to defer.
Councillor Stretch?
Against the motion.
Councillor Hensby?
Negatory.
Councillor Karsten?
Against the motion.
Councillor Nicol?
For.
Councillor Austin?
Against.
Councillor Mancini,
The same, against. Sorry, Councillor Nickel.
Councillor Mason,
Against the motion.
Councillor Smith,
Against.
Councillor Cleary,
No.
Councillor Walker,
Against.
Councillor Adams,
Against.
Councillor Zarowski,
Against the motion.
Councillor Whitman,
No.
Deputy Mayor Blackburn,
Voting against the deferral, sorry.
Councillor Russell,
Voting for the deferral.
Councillor Outthit,
Voting no.
Mr. Mayor,
No.
the motion is defeated.
Motion is defeated, so the original motion is on the floor. Councillor Russell, we'll go back to you.
My question has been answered. Thank you.
Okay. On the main motion, unamended.
Question.
Ready for the question.
Question?
Councillor Stretch,
For the motion.
Councillor Hensby,
Affirmative.
Councillor Karsten,
For the motion.
Councillor Nickel,
No.
Councillor Austin,
In favor.
Councillor Mancini,
In favor of the motion.
Councillor Mason,
For the motion.
Councillor Smith,
For.
Councillor Cleary,
Yes.
Councillor Walker,
Or.
Councillor Adams,
For.
Councillor Zarowski,
For the motion.
Councillor Whitman,
For the motion.
Deputy Mayor Blackburn,
For the motion.
Councillor Russell,
Against the motion.
Councillor Outthit,
For the motion.
and Mayor Savage.
For the motion, that motion is carried. The main motion is carried.
If I may, Richard, you are sharing your screen.
I want to thank Mr. Robbins and Mr. Ayub and Mr. Cooper and Mr. McDougall for being part of our discussions. Okay, colleagues, can we keep going? Do another one before we take a break? Bio break. Let's take on 8.5, which is a public hearing. It is disposal of surplus real property, 948 Hawk Walk Road. We'll again begin with a staff presentation and then give the applicant as such an opportunity to present if here. No speakers have signed up. And so we will begin with a staff presentation. Who has graced us with their presence this evening from staff?
Ms. Savage, it's PJ Temple, Grants and Contributions Finance, and I'm joined by Colin Walsh, Acting Project Manager from Real Estate. We're both from Finance, Asset Management, and ITC.
Lovely to have you.
Thank you. And he's hoping the power stays with us. So the purpose of tonight's public hearing is to consider the conveyance of 948 Popwalk Road, Upper Hammonds Plains, to the Upper Hammonds Plains Community Development Association. This would be a sale, if approved, at less than market value. Next slide, please. The municipality has the authority under the HRN Charter to sell a property or lease it at less than market value. The property has to be declared surplus by Regional Council, and through our Administrative Order 50 process, this property was placed in the community interest category. And for the viewing public, that category is limited to nonprofit and charitable organizations. A resolution to sell or lease the property must be passed by a 2/3 majority of council present and voting. Because this property has an appraised value of $155,000 and an assessed value of $68,900, a public hearing was required. Next slide, please. Oops, we're going backwards. There we go. So council passed this motion on August 18th. And now we're going to entertain any submissions from the public or questions from council before advancing to a decision. Next slide, please. Table 1 is a summary of the key terms and conditions. It is proposed, recommended by staff, that council accept purchase price of $1. Staff are recommending that a buyback agreement not be applied to this conveyance. And the proposed use by the association would be for a youth arts and cultural centre. I think it's also important to note today has been a historic day for the history of firefighting. Your earlier decision to register Station 2 as a heritage property. This property has the distinction, the cultural and historical significance of being the first all-black volunteer fire department for the region, for the province of Nova Scotia, and for Canada. It's also important to note that the land was donated by a local resident, Mrs. Elizabeth Mantley. The building itself was constructed by volunteers from the community. They did so partly through their own fundraising and through a local area rate. The reason that we hold title right now is that at the time of Mrs. Mantley's donation of land, the volunteer fire department was not an incorporated entity, and therefore title was held by the municipality. So really, the purpose of the process that we've pursued is to try to convey this property back to the community for their future use. Next slide, please. This is a photograph. I think in a previous report I said a 3-bay, it's a 4-bay garage. And it is encumbered, I think you can just see in the lower right-hand corner, it is encumbered by a Canada Post mailbox. But I would also like to note that the building, there was a building condition report. It is considered to be in fair condition. And given it's been vacant for such an extended period, I think this demonstrates resident stewardship of this property. It's not been subject to vandalism. It is truly valued by residents. Next slide, please. The yellow triangle indicates the actual land area. You can see it's on the Popwalk Road. And that really, I think, concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, PJ, very much. I don't see any questions of clarification. So I'll open the public hearing. I don't know if the applicant is here. The applicant is Gina Jones Wilson for the Upper Hammonds Plains Community Center. I don't know if is she with us?
Clarification.
Oh, clarification.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you to hold off for 1 sec, ma'am, if you would.
Okay.
And Councillor Stretch has a question of clarification for staff. Go ahead, Councillor Stretch.
I do, and thank you, Your Worship. I wasn't quite quick enough on that button. Through you to PJ, I noticed in the on the screen it talked about no buyback agreement in this case, PJ. I know on several other occasions, including a couple of buildings in my district, we had put buyback agreements in. Can you just explain to council why in this case you're not recommending that?
Certainly, through you, Mayor Savage. It goes back to the origins. Public money was not expended in acquiring the land. Public money, to my knowledge, or any research we've been able to do, was not expended in the construction of the property. That was largely, I think, through an area rate and fundraising. And its operation was largely sustained through the efforts of local residents to raise funds. So we have no utility for it now, and we didn't anticipate any future utility.
Okay, thank you, PJ. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. So the public hearing I'm opening. So the applicant from the Upper Hammonds Plains Community Center is with us?
Yes. My name is Gina Jones Wilson. I'm president of the Upper Hammonds Plains Community Development Association, which is the organization which will be taking back the ownership of the Upper Hammonds Plains Fire Hall. The residents thought it was really important for us to have the building back, considering all the work that the residents put into building it in the first place. And it's we're in an area where we have no access to public transit, so it's really important for us to have youth access to recreational facilities, because right now we have 2 in the area, but we can't get our kids to them. So taking this building, changing it over into, I should say renovating it over into a recreational and arts and cultural center will allow our community youth to have access to their community heritage, plus also having a place to do some recreational activities, especially in the winter months, because we do have a basketball court and that type of thing, but they're all outside. We don't have anything that's inside that they can use during the winter months. So it's also health and safety, not health and safety, but it's a health issue too. That's just to keep our kids healthy and same time learning about their background. As everybody knows, this is a very troubled time with Black youth. So we thought this would be the perfect time for them to learn about their own history at the same time that they're seeing things going on throughout the world.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jones-Wilson. We appreciate you being with us.
Yes.
Is there somebody else there? Okay. I don't see any questions of clarification. There's nobody who has signed up to speak, so I'll look for a motion. Councillor Whitman, would you like to close the public hearing?
Yes, please, Mayor Savage.
Moved by Councillor Whitman, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, that we close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Councillor Whitman.
Thank you, Mayor Savage. Thank you, PJ Temple. Thank you, Gina Jones-Wilson and community from Upper Hammonds Plains. I'd like to put the motion on the floor, which I definitely support. The motion is that Halifax Regional Council approve the sale of 948 Park Road, Upper Hammonds Plains, identified as PID 00424-358, to the Upper Hammonds Plains Community Development Association, and authorize the Chief Administrative Officer to negotiate an agreement of purchase and sale to be executed by the Mayor and Clerk on behalf of the municipality as per the terms and conditions outlined in Table 1 of the staff report dated July 15th, 2020.
Second.
Second by Deputy Mayor. Councillor Whitman, anything on it?
Yeah, just very quickly. Thank you, Mayor Savage, and thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, staff, PJ Temple, who's been working on this file as long as I've been around, and to Gina Jones-Wilson, Pastor Leonard Anderson, and the Anderson twin brothers that were original firefighters in this Black fire station. And just, I guess, a sigh of relief that this has finally got here during this time towards the end of this election cycle, and very much appreciate the hard work by staff, very much appreciate this community, and I thank you, Mayor and colleagues, for supporting this.
Okay. Seeing no other speakers, ready for the question, colleagues?
Question?
Councillor Stretch?
For the motion.
Councillor Hensby?
Affirmative.
Councillor Karsten?
For the motion.
Councillor Nicol?
In favor.
Councillor Austin?
In favor.
Councillor Mancini?
In favor of the motion.
Councillor Mason?
For the motion.
Councillor Smith?
For.
Councillor Cleary?
Yes.
Councillor Walker?
Or.
Councillor Adams?
For.
Councillor Zarowski?
For the motion.
Councillor Whitman?
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Blackburn?
Voting yes on the motion.
Councillor Russell?
In favor?
Councillor Outthit,
Voting yes.
Mr. Mayor,
In favor. I declare that's carried. Thank you to Gina Jones-Wilson and all the folks at the Upper Hammonds Plains Community Center. Thank you to PJ and to Colin. That motion carries. And thank you, Councillor Whitman. Colleagues, we'll move to our last public hearing. This is case 20756. This is amendments to the Dartmouth Municipal Planning Strategy for 246 Waverley Road and 2 and 4 Montebello Drive. Again, for people's edification, we will start with a staff presentation, give the applicant an opportunity to present via phone. No speakers have signed up. So we will begin with the staff presentation. Do I understand that Leah is with us? Leah Perrin?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thanks for joining us. Go ahead.
Great. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of Regional Council. My name is Leah Perrin. I'm a planner with Regional Planning, and tonight I'm here to present case 20756 regarding a proposed municipal planning strategy amendment for 246 Waverley Road and 2 and 4 Montebello Drive in Dartmouth. Next slide. The applicant, ZAP Consulting, on behalf of the property owner G2J Residential Holdings, has applied to amend the Dartmouth Municipal Planning Strategy for 246 Waverley Road and 2 and 4 Montebello Drive in Dartmouth. The applicant has requested to redesignate the site to the Waverley Road mixed-use subdesignation, which would allow future consideration of a multiple unit dwelling through a development agreement process. Next slide. The site is located at the southeast corner of Waverley Road and Montebello Drive. It is on the northern end of the commercial section of Waverley Road and near to Shuby Park. Next slide. The site is shown outlined in red at the southeast corner of Waverley Road and Montebello. The property owner also owns 3 adjacent properties at 54, 58, and 60 Micmac Drive, which are shown in purple on this image. The site is next to a Tim Hortons restaurant. It's across the street from 2 commercial plazas with medical and dental clinics, pharmacy, personal services, and small restaurants. And there's a small auto repair business on the northeastern corner of Montebello and Waverley. Next slide. This slide shows 2 views from Waverley Road. There are houses at 2 Montebello Drive and Waverley Road, and there are large trees in front, so they're just hidden in these images. Next slide. This image shows the view looking west down Montebello Drive towards Waverley Road, and it shows the house at 4 Montebello Drive, and at the left of the image you can see houses on Micmac Drive. Next slide. Under the Dartmouth Municipal Planning Strategy, 246 Waverley Road and 2 Montebello Drive are within the Waverley Road designation. 4 Montebello Drive is not within the Waverley Road designation. It is just general residential. That general residential designation policy allows a range of building forms and residential densities. All 3 properties are zoned R1, single family residential, under the Dartmouth Land Use Bylaw. Next slide. The Waverley Road policy was adopted in 2009 to address land use conflicts between commercial, industrial, and residential uses south of the subject site near Redbridge Pond. The study was expanded northward at that time to include sort of all of the commercial area along Waverley Road. There are 3 subdesignations within the Waverley Road designation, including the neighborhood subdesignation, which is shown in purple, the low density residential subdesignation in yellow, and the mixed use subdesignation, which is shown in red. 246 Waverley Road and 2 Montebello Drive are within the neighborhood subdesignation, and that policy envisions that the area would become a sort of neighborhood commercial node in the future. The mixed use subdesignation policy applies to lands near Redwood Pond and on the west side of Waverley Road, which have been used for a mix of commercial and industrial uses. Under policy C41, the mixed use subdesignation policy allows council to consider multiple unit dwellings by development agreement. And when considering a development agreement, the policy directs community council to consider criteria under policy IP5 regarding apartment building development and advises council should use the land use density standards of the R3 zone as a guide. Next slide. The application was originally submitted by another applicant on behalf of the same property owner. It proposed a 5-story, 56-unit residential building with driveway access from Waverley Road. On April 25th, 2017, Regional Council directed staff to consider applying the mixed-use subdesignation to the site and to conduct public consultation. Next slide. The public information meeting was held on September 20th, 2017. There were around 150 people at that meeting. Staff also gave a presentation to the Port Wallace Community Seniors Group that same week, and there was a petition circulated to Community Council in favor of the proposal that was submitted by the applicant. Public comments included significant concern about traffic congestion and traffic safety in the neighborhood and at the Waverley-Montebello intersection in particular. Concern that the size and density of the proposed 5-story 56-unit building would not fit the location and would not be compatible with the neighborhood, and there was some support for the proposal. Next slide. So after the public information meeting, planning staff reviewed the original proposal against the mixed-use subdesignation policy and advised the applicant that the proposed building was not reasonably consistent with the intent of the policy regarding density and the building's bulk and scale in relation to the neighborhood. We suggested design changes that could allow the proposal to better meet the intent of that policy, including reducing the number of stories and introducing building setbacks or step backs to reduce the overall density and improve compatibility with the neighborhood. In October 2019, ZAP Consulting took over the application and we discussed the outstanding issues with them. In March 2020, they submitted a revised building concept for a 5-story building with 40 residential units, approximately 4,260 square feet of commercial or residential space facing Waverley Road, and 45 interior parking spaces with driveway access from Montebello Drive. Next slide. So the existing Waverley Road policy identifies that multiple unit dwellings can contribute to a desired walkable mixed use community and allows them to be considered by development agreement in the mixed use designation. Since the Waverley Road policies were adopted in 2009, new commercial uses were constructed on lands within the mixed use subdesignation, but no multiple unit dwellings have been constructed. However, there are 3 vacant sites within the mixed use subdesignation where multiple unit dwellings could be considered today. There is a high demand for housing across the region with a very low 1% overall apartment vacancy rate. There are several apartment buildings in the Waverley Road area, but they are more than 30 years old. New multiple unit dwellings therefore could provide additional housing choice in the neighborhood. Therefore, redesignating the subject site to the mixed use subdesignation policy would appropriately respond to the changes in the area since the policy's adoption while maintaining the overall intent of the community's vision. If the mixed use subdesignation was applied to the subject site, concerns around neighborhood compatibility would be mitigated through land use controls negotiated through a development agreement process. It is important to note that this application and council's decision tonight deals only with the proposed amendments to the Dartmouth Municipal Planning Strategy. If Regional Council chooses to approve this amendment, the applicant has indicated that they would apply for a development agreement and a rezoning so that a comprehensive development that includes the property owner's additional lands on Micmac Drive would be pursued. Detailed design of that proposed building, servicing and access issues would be dealt with through a development agreement process that would be considered in the future by Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council. In conclusion, staff recommends that, next slide, I guess, but in conclusion, staff recommend that Regional Council redesignate 246 Waverley Road and 2 and 4 Montebello Drive to the Waverley Road mixed use subdesignation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perrin, very much. A question of clarification from the local councillor, Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Leah. Thank you very much. I do want to take this time to thank you to always give me planning 101 instructions, which I need daily, but thank you for that, Leah. Very quickly, just to clarify, on that site today, as it stands, what could be constructed without a change to the policy?
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. So right now the site is zoned R1. So without any change, sort of discretionary change of council, what can be constructed is what's permitted in the R1 zone, which is single family homes. And there's a sort of range of, parks and community uses that can be considered in R1 as well. But the zone, or sorry, the lands are designated that neighborhood subdesignation. And the neighborhood subdesignation does enable council to consider the C1A neighborhood commercial zone. And that zone permits sort of a range of, it permits residential uses up to sort of townhouses, I believe, and a range of commercial uses, sort of small commercial uses. The Tim Hortons next door is in the C1A zone, so it's just sort of a range of neighborhood commercial uses that's permitted under the existing policy.
Thank you, Leah, for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, I thank you, Ms. Perrin, and invite you to stay with us. I will open the public hearing, and I invite the applicant to address council. I encourage them to say next slide when they want their presentation slides advanced. I understand perhaps it's Connor Wallace and Tony Shadrawi that might be with us tonight. Is that correct?
That's correct. Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
I hear you. Is that Connor?
It is, yes. Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. As mentioned, my name is Connor Wallace, and I'm a planner with ZAP Consulting. Had to unite regarding this proposed MPS Amendment application for the 3 properties, as Leah noted, located adjacent to the intersection of Waverly Road and Montebello Drive in Dartmouth. Next slide, please. So I did have a slide prepared here, kind of giving a brief background on this application, which was originally submitted in August of 2016. I won't spend too much time on this slide, as Leah had given a thorough background of this as well. However, over the course of 4 years, we're now at a public hearing considering the MPS Amendment application. And us here at ZAP have joined the project team, as Leah noted, in October of last year, and have worked to review the community feedback that was received in advance of that, as well as work with staff to align our current design proposal with the applicable planning policies. Next slide, please. So prior to diving into the current design proposal, I'd like to briefly speak to the community feedback that was received at the public information meeting back in 2017. Next slide, please. So on your screen now is a perspective image of the original proposal that was submitted back in 2016 and presented for community feedback at the public information meeting in September of 2017. During that meeting, there was some general support for the project, as Leah noted. However, there were some concerns that were brought up by members of the public as well. Most significant and frequent concerns mentioned were related to traffic, particularly the capacity of that intersection of Waverly Road and Montebello Drive to handle a development of this size in conjunction with other planned developments in the area. Attendees also raised concerns with designated drop-off and loading spaces, and that impact on traffic was reiterated quite often. There was also concerns relative to the overall size and density of the development and its fit within the community. Next slide, please. So after joining the project team in 2019, we reviewed the comments and feedback received at that meeting, and as noted, worked with staff over several months to address our design to align with not only the policy, but the feedback that was received. And as you can see on the slide here is a bit of a comparison of the site plan that was presented in the original proposal to the public in 2017 in comparison to the current site plan. Next slide. Now on your screen is just some perspective images of the 2 proposals. On the left there is the original perspective rendering that was submitted in 2017, and on the right is 2 perspective images of the current proposal. The one on the bottom right corner being the perspective from the intersection of Waverly Road and Montebello Drive, and the second in the top right corner being a perspective image from Montebello Drive, looking at the back side of the development as it meets the properties that front on Micmac Drive. As you can see in the design, we have reallocated the mass and location of the mass within the site by setting the building back further from the street, creating a 2-story podium that terraces up the slope of Montebello Drive and integrates the building into the landscape. So it appears as a 5-story building facing Waverly Road and Montebello Drive intersection, but as it integrates into the landscape, as you can see in the top right image, it integrates in the landscape to become a 3-story form facing the R1 properties that are located on Micmac Drive. Next slide, please. So I'd like to just quickly note some of the changes that were made to bring us to the current design proposal. So we did reduce the overall lot coverage by setting the building back further away from Waverly Road and Montebello Drive. This will enable future upgrades to the road network and intersections, such as adding a northbound right turn lane on Waverly Road. We also created a 2-story podium with significant setbacks to the upper 3 stories to create that human scale street wall experience that isn't overbearing to the community, is in line with the general form and character of the community. We did relocate the underground parking access on Montebello Drive furthest from the intersection to reduce the amount of inbound and outbound traffic on Waverly Road, which is a busier street, and locating it further away from that intersection to minimize its impact on the capacity of that intersection. And the overall unit count was reduced from 56 to 40 with a consideration of some commercial and or residential uses facing Waverly Road, as Leah had noted. Next slide, please. I'd like to quickly speak to the current proposal in relation to the applicable policies that would, if a future development agreement would be considered under, should council decide to approve the municipal permitting strategy amendments that are being presented this evening. There's kind of 4 general categories that fall within that density criteria, or that policy criteria: the density standards, compatibility and consistency with adjacent uses, buffering and landscaping, and access and impact on traffic. As noted in the staff report, the current design proposal generally addresses that intent of the MPS policy, and should council decide to approve the MPS amendment application this evening, we look forward to continuing to work with staff and the community through a development agreement process to ensure that the design proposal aligns with policy and community feedback. The last thing I'd like to note, as Leah had mentioned as well, is that tonight council is considering the MPS amendments to allow for the future consideration of a multi-unit development on these subject properties through a separate development agreement process. We as the applicant understand that if council does approve these MPS amendments this evening, that the conversation does not stop here. And we look forward to continuing to work with staff and community members through a development agreement process to further develop our current design proposal to align with planning policy and community feedback. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'm certainly available to answer any questions or clarifications you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wallace, very much. There is nobody who had signed up in order to speak to this, so I will look for a motion to close.
Move to close the public hearing.
Councillor Mancini, seconded by?
I will second that.
Councillor Russell. Councillor Mancini.
Mr. Mayor, I'll put the motion on the floor, excuse me, that Halifax Regional Council adopt amendments to the municipal planning strategy for Dartmouth as set out in attachment A of the June 1st, 2020 staff report to redesignate lands at the southeast corner of the Waverly Road and Montebello Drive, that's Civic 246 Waverly Road, and 2 and 4 Montebello Drive to WR mixed use sub designation. So moved.
Seconded, Councillor Carson.
Seconded by Councillor Carson. Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Councillor Carson. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, everyone. A great job, Lee, on the history of this, but let me just paraphrase it a little bit, if I may. Lots of history on it, and you saw the public engagement that took place. There was lots of conversation, and it's interesting because we've gone through many of these in the past 4 years, these types of applications, and sometimes the process is very difficult, and sometimes the process is proven to follow the process works, and I think it's worked in this case to get us to where we are today. We had the public information hearing. You saw the numbers that Leah shared, lots of engagement, lots of concerns with what was originally proposed on this site. We heard it tonight. We have 56 units, the traffic, the parking, the size, the not fitting the community, and I heard it from the residents loud and clear. And I think the applicant heard it from it also, because they actually understood that most likely the staff were going to give a negative recommendation. So because it was too far away from the existing policy, so they pulled the application. And they came back to what you saw tonight. Now, we're here tonight not to talk about the building. We're just here tonight to talk about, do we change the policy to allow a multi-unit building on this site? And as identified, we've known, all of us know about the lack of units. But in this particular area, there are a couple of older apartment buildings and one older condo building. It's an area where many people that want to stay in the area, but they want to downsize, and there is no option to do so. Should we park is nearby, the schools are nearby. It's a great community, and so there are no options. So, you know, I really like what we have here tonight. I think the opportunity is for our residents, though. If this is approved, and I ask all my colleagues to allow us to do the change to policy tonight to move forward, the development agreement for all residents listening tonight, that's the opportunity we can really roll up our sleeves and take a look at what's being proposed and is this addressing the concerns. So for my colleagues, if you remember Waverly Road, Montebello, in behind is Micmac Drive and Bonita Drive. A lot of cut through goes through there. Traffic issues at the peak hours, particularly coming home. They've set back the design, so the opportunity to put a right-hand turn in here to help with that. And also for my colleagues who may not be aware of this, starting this fall, which could be actually any day now, traffic calming is going to take place on Montebello. So we're doing a lot to address this, but the development agreement is the direction we need to go to. So I ask that you support what's in front of us tonight. And then I'll work very closely with the residents. It's a very engaged community to make sure they understand what we're taking a look at. We'll have a public session. I believe the applicants even willing to do their own at the same time so we can communicate. So I like the direction we're going in and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no questions, are we ready for the question on the motion?
Question?
Let's go to the vote.
Councillor Stretch,
For the motion.
Councillor Hensby,
Affirmative.
Councillor Karsten,
For the motion.
Councillor Nicol,
In favor.
Councillor Mancini.
In favor of the motion.
Did I skip over Councillor Austin? My
You
apologies.
did. I'm in favor.
A lot of people
Councillor.
drive right to District 6, so they skip District 5 all the time, so.
Councillor Mason,
Also for the motion.
Councillor Smith,
For.
Councillor Cleary,
Yes.
Councillor Walker,
Or
Councillor Adams,
for.
Councillor Zarowski,
For the motion.
Councillor Whitman,
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Blackburn,
Voting yes on the motion.
Councillor Russell,
In favor?
Councillor Outthit,
Voting yes.
Mayor Savage.
For the motion, so that motion passes. I thank Leah Perrin. I thank Connor Wallace, Tony Shadrawi. That motion is passed. Colleagues, that's
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering, Phoebe, if I may have a question, the applicant's presentation, was that sent to us? I have staff's presentation, but I don't think we received the applicant's.
Yes, I get
It
the
was
applicant.
sent? Okay, I'll look at, I may have misplaced it. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
And
Mr.
okay,
Mayor,
colleagues, so that
it's Councillor Carson. Yeah, just before we go in camera, I would move the approval of the September 1st minutes if you wanted me to.
all right.
Okay.
Is there a second for that?
Councillor Cleary,
Second.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? That's carried. 13.2, we have deferred to after October 17. Just looking at the other two items, is there anything, I assume it'll go into camera if somebody moves, or if anybody wants to try to pass something without going in camera?
Move go on camera, Mr. Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Mason, we go in camera, seconded by
Second.
Councillor
Councillor
Russell.
Russell.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We will take 5 minutes to make the move, but this will be our last. We will not, I guess we're gone.
I'm here. We're here.
Can't hear you.
We will, yeah, but it looks like the camera thing is up. So just wanted to let people know that we will not be back in session tonight in public, so. Okay, so we have to change machines, do we?
Yeah, well.
Change meeting rooms.
Change
Yes.
meeting rooms. But if you want to change your machine, you can do that too.
Are we doing this one or the other one? This one, right?
This would be the correct one.
This one said 6 o'clock.
We've been meeting so long, I need to shave again.
Yep, you do.
Aren't you going to ask to go till 10 o'clock to get all the other things done?
Thumbs down.
So what happens to the things that we didn't do today? Because I thought the 29th were just public hearings. Oh, we're having an additional meeting.
Yeah, on the 30th.
Yes, yeah.
That's correct. Everything's going to be brought forward to the agenda on the 29th with a reconvening on the 30th note applied to that agenda.
And thank you for my chuckle of the day, Phoebe.
I aim to please, Councillor.
Yeah, that was good.
We've all been there.
And we've all wanted to say it.
I think everybody's feeling that way. Are we in the right room?
Yeah, I think folks might have went back to the first meeting.
Yeah.
We're in the right place.
Phoebe's in this room. We're in the right room.
Exactly.
Right.
Wait, are you aware?
Well, it depends if the CIO and John are here.
Sorry, what was that, Lurley?
Did you realize there's a rally to save the historic Queen Street buildings on Thursday?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Led by Larry Haven.
Yep.
Yep. I thought the mayor said giddy up.
They're probably all in the other room.
April is gone to the other meeting to retrieve councillors.
Yes, because if we leave this meeting, then we'll go over there and they'll all be coming over here.
Like Benny Hill.
They have the note to come over here.
With Phoebe.
Yep.
Here they come. You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
My father's house has many rooms. If this were not so, I would quote from the Bible.
What the heck in the world? Okay, there we go again.
Are we all
And
good?
is this when you're going to tell people, Mr. Mayor, that we were right the first time they were wrong?
No, I don't say that during election campaigns.
Oh.
All right, we, Phoebe, are you with us? And April?
We are here with you, Mr. Mayor, and I believe we do have quorum. I'm not sure if we have solicitor.
I'm here.
Yes, we do. And the CAO is here as well, I believe.
Okay, so
Yes,
we're
I am.
live. Looks like I'm live right now.
You are indeed, Mr. Mayor.
I feel alive. All right, colleagues, we're back in public session after our in-camera session to ratify a couple of items. The first one is 13.3, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that Halifax Regional Council, 1, adapt the recommendations as outlined in the private and confidential staff report dated September 11th, 2020, and 2, not release a private and confidential staff report dated September 11th, 2020 to the public.
Second by Mancini.
Okay, let's go to the vote.
Question.
Councillor Stretch,
For the motion.
Councillor Hensby,
Affirmative.
Councillor Karsten,
For the motion?
Councillor Nicol,
In favor.
Councillor Austin,
In favor.
Councillor Mancini,
For the motion.
Councillor Mason,
For the motion.
Councillor Smith,
4.
Councillor Cleary,
Yes.
Councillor Walker,
For.
Councillor Adams,
For.
Councillor Zarowski,
For the motion.
Councillor Whitman, Deputy Mayor Blackburn,
Voting yes on the motion.
Councillor Russell,
In favor?
Councillor Outhitt,
Voting yes.
and is Councillor Whitman in the meeting? No, Mr. Mayor.
For the motion? Declare that that motion's carried. We'll move to 13.4. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Halifax Regional Council 1, adopt the recommendations as outlined in the private and confidential staff report dated August 19th, 2020, and 2, further direct the CAO to prepare and execute a communication plan with respect to the report, and 3, not release the private and confidential staff report dated August 19th, 2020 to the public. I so move.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Karsten. Let's go to the question.
Councillor Stretch,
For the motion.
Councillor Hensby,
Affirmative.
Councillor Karsten,
For the motion?
Councillor Nicol,
In favor.
Councillor Austin,
In favor.
Councillor Mancini,
For the motion.
Councillor Mason,
For the motion.
Councillor Smith,
4.
Councillor Cleary,
Yes.
Councillor Walker,
For.
Councillor Adams,
For.
Councillor Zarowski,
For the motion.
Councillor Whitman, Deputy Mayor Blackburn,
Voting yes on the motion.
Councillor Russell,
In favor?
Councillor Outhitt,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
In favor, that motion carries. We've done notices of motion 8 times. We have our next meeting next Tuesday. We have a number of items, hearings, appeal, and we're holding Wednesday too. We didn't get to all of our items today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for a good day's work. We wish everybody in the municipality to be safe. If you're near the coast, be very careful, evacuate if you need to. And the very best to all of our residents. See you next week.
Be safe, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, staff.
All right.
Be safe.
Good night, everybody. Thank you, staff.
Night.